Hi, Dr. Tatiana Estray here, and today I want to talk about using I statements to make requests in relationship and how to do that effectively. So let me start by saying that relationships have ups and downs. This is normal. The definition of a good relationship is the ability to have that difficult conversation and get to somewhere productive at the end. The absence of a difficult conversation just means that you're sweeping things under the rug. And if you're constantly having these difficult conversations escalate and not be productive, that's also not helpful. So there's a third way to navigate these, which is learning how to communicate in a way that gets at the root problem without escalation. The technique that we use for that is I statements versus you statements. So let's dive a little bit into that. All right. What do you statements actually imply? Generally, when you say something like, you did this wrong, what you're saying is that the person is responsible for you being upset or they did something wrong. And it feels completely normal. It's just a way that we learn to talk. It feels normal to communicate in that way because you're agitated. And very often you're not thinking about the relationship. You're thinking about what that person did to you and the fact that you don't feel comfortable in that moment. However, a massive thing that happens when you start saying like you statements and you did something wrong is inadvertently what you're doing is you're accusing the person or criticizing them. And all of a sudden they need to defend themselves. The dance is attack, defense, attack, defense. In this little exchange, there is no room for understanding or getting at the root problem or understanding that each person brings a slightly different lens to the interaction. And so what we need to talk about is how we're going to navigate this to find a solution that works for both people. You statements, while when you're trained to use I statements and conflict management, you can learn how to navigate you statements. The vast majority of people don't have that training. So they are most likely going to find that to be an attack and respond accordingly. And some people are going to respond very much accordingly in degree to which they feel attacked. Now, the I statement is a slightly different dance. So I statement is about you taking responsibility for your feelings and your side of things. And it's also a very vulnerable position, in part because now you're talking about your needs and preferences. And your counterpart has the ability to take an action and meet them or not. So there's no guarantees it's going to work out in your benefit. That I statement is really an invitation for vulnerability and for the person to take care of your needs. So instead of attack and defend, now it's like vulnerability, the need for care, and someone to potentially move towards that space to meet your need. So I can understand why some people don't love to go into that space of vulnerability, in part because what you're going to fear is that that person is not going to meet you. And what does that mean for the relationship, or what are you going to do? While we can talk about contingency plans, and that's always a really great thing to have in relationships, I think ultimately if you want to strengthen your relationships, you have to learn how to be assertive and respectful in your requests and learn how to be vulnerable appropriate to the situation. So one of the things that I like to teach is a 5-step formula for making I requests. And this is a way to depersonalize the situation and really focus on what you need. And you can adjust this based on the context and how much you want to share with the person. But ultimately, the general flow is when you, action, I feel, feeling, the story I'm telling myself is I need, want, prefer, and would you, specific action. So what that looks like is you specify exactly what the partner did, what your counterpart did, and you don't make any comments about their character. It's just that this behavior didn't land for me properly, or when you did this, it wasn't helpful because whatever. I feel, and this is really important, there's a difference between I think and I feel. Oftentimes we use the word feel to qualify what we're going to say or diminish the impact because we're scared of how it's going to land. Feelings are things like sad, hurt, joyful, angry, disappointed, fearful. However, when you start saying things like, I feel you don't care about me, or I feel you just disregard us, or you're just doing whatever you want, what you're doing is you're articulating a judgment, but not actually taking responsibility. What you probably feel is sad or disappointed or angry. In communicating the sad disappointment or anger, you're also inviting your counterpart to do the emotional dance that comes along with that emotion. So if it's angry, it might be appease or adjust. So you respect the person's boundary. If it's sadness, saying sorry. If it's disappointed, it means that a goal wasn't met or there's a loss, and then that person can do something. But ultimately, what we're doing when we're stating our real feelings is we're trying to activate people's emotional centers kind of around relational caretaking. And the great thing is, because we're humans and we're social creatures, everyone has these mechanisms. So I promise you, saying I feel is going to lead to a little bit more of a better conversation. The next part is the story I'm telling myself is. And this is your way to take responsibility for the judgment and a way to let the other person know what's happening in their mind and how they're coming across. And it's very important that you separate impact from intention. So people don't often mean to have a negative impact on you. No average person wants to make you feel bad. But often in the way that they act, they will make you feel bad, or they will do something to disappoint you, or they're not going to live up to an expectation you have. And so separating that by saying, like, you might not have intended to, but when you did this, this is how it impacted me, is a really great way to invite that person to now be reflective on the impact without having to justify and protect themselves as a person, as their character. Sometimes it takes a little while to really understand that difference, and sometimes there needs to be a communication around that just so that they know you don't think that they're bad or that you don't disvalue the relationship, but that behavior is not working for you, and that's fair. That happens. When you say I need, want, or prefer, what you're doing now is you're taking responsibility to identify what you need in the relationship. Sometimes people will just say they feel dissatisfied but not take the next step, which is problem solve, or they expect the other person to mind read and do something, and that's not always fair because what you're looking for isn't necessarily what's obvious for another person. So by saying you need, want, prefer, you're getting very specific to what you want out of the situation, and you're inviting the other person to meet you there. The next is would you, very specific request, and you can leave it open. I have a really great blog about it. I'm going to put a link in the notes below, and if you're interested, you can read a bit more about it, but I love this script. I find it a really great way to start really adjusting how you communicate with other people. And I will make a final note. Sometimes in relationships, things aren't great, and that's okay, and you ride it out and you try to find a solution. For the most part, I think most people are quite reasonable, even if it might take a little bit of time to have the discussions needed to sort out an issue. However, sometimes people are completely committed to not understanding you and not wanting to solve the problem with you. And if that's the case, I think you need to make a decision for yourself in terms of where your bottom line is and what you're going to do if the person isn't going to engage in solving the problem with you. The important thing, though, to note is that you have an onus to clean up your side of the communication, and in doing so, invite the person to have a different dance with you. And don't worry if you're scared of, getting it wrong, or you're scared of having a difficult conversation. Really good relationships, they take patience, they have forgiveness. And most people are willing to go on that space, into that space with you. I think definitely makes the relationship better. And for people in general, the more comfortable and more experience they have having these difficult conversations, the better other areas of their life improves because they're willing to go there as well. So feel free to check out the blog, and I hope this inspires you to have some difficult conversations if you've been holding off.